"You just want a savage for your bed," she cried. The cowboy whispered, "I want a woman for my life." The air smelled faintly of hay, earth, and the subtle sweetness of wildflowers growing along the roadside. Birds chirped lazily in the distance, and a soft wind rustled through the tall grass. Life moved slowly here, in a rhythm dictated by nature, the cattle and the sun. And yet, for all its calmness, the town had a way of drawing people in, of making them notice things they might have overlooked before. She had arrived just a week ago. Her life had always been full of noise, movement, and city streets that never slept. But something about this town called to her. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe it was the simplicity, or maybe it was the idea of starting fresh. She had rented a small cabin on the edge of town, near the hills where the fields rolled endlessly into the horizon. Every morning, she woke to the sound of roosters crowing, dogs barking in the distance, and the faint creak of a gate swinging somewhere down the road. It was a rhythm she hadn't realized she was missing. On this particular afternoon, she decided to explore the nearby ranches. She had heard stories from the locals, how the ranches here were the lifeblood of the community, how families worked the land for generations, and how the cowboys here took pride in their work. She wanted to see it for herself, to step into a world so different from her own. With her boots kicking up dust, she walked along a worn path, her eyes scanning the fences, barns, and grazing cattle. Everything seemed alive, and yet untouched by the chaos of city life. That's when she saw him. The cowboy was leaning against the wooden fence of his property, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes, shading a face that had been hardened by years under the sun, but softened by something she couldn't quite name. His hands were rough, calloused from work, yet gentle as he adjusted the rope tied to a young horse struggling to free itself. There was a quiet authority in the way he moved, a confidence that came not from boasting but from knowing exactly who he was and what he could do. She froze for a moment, unsure if she should continue. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her heart beat a little faster. She tried to look away, telling herself she had no business on someone else's property, but her curiosity won over. She stepped closer, and that's when the horse let out a sudden whinny, spinning and jerking the rope. Without thinking, she called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The cowboy's eyes lifted, meeting hers for the first time. There was a flicker of surprise, quickly masked by a calm, measured gaze. "I'm fine," he said, his voice low, steady, and carrying a warmth she hadn't expected. "You shouldn't be here, though. This is private property." She swallowed nervously, realizing she had crossed an invisible boundary. I'm sorry, I was just exploring." Her voice was soft, tinged with hesitation. She didn't know why she felt the need to explain herself, but something about him made her want to be honest. He nodded, tightening the rope around the horse to calm it. "Exploring, huh? You picked the right place for it, I guess. Not many people come out this far." There was a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, though his eyes remained serious. She couldn't help but notice the contrast, the roughness of his hands, the lines on his face, and the softness in his tone. There was something intriguing about him, something that made her forget for a moment where she was or why she had come here. "I'm new to town," she admitted. "I just moved in last week. I wanted to see the ranches, see what life is like here." He studied her for a moment, tilting his head slightly as if weighing her words. "New in town, huh? That explains why you're wandering onto people's land." His tone was teasing now, lighter than before, and it made her laugh nervously. She was caught off guard by the warmth behind the words. "I guess I'm a little curious," she said. "It's all so different from where I'm from. Everything moves slower here and it feels peaceful." He let out a short chuckle. "You think it's peaceful? Wait till you spend a summer in this heat, waking up before the sun, working the fields from dawn till dusk. Then you'll know what peaceful really means." His eyes sparkled with a hint of humor, and she felt a small thrill run through her. There was a story behind those eyes, she could tell, though he wasn't ready to share it yet. Before she could respond, the horse let out another loud whinny, causing both of them to step back. He moved quickly, grabbing the rope and calming the animal with a practiced ease. She watched, fascinated by the way he handled it, not with force but with understanding. Every movement was precise, confident, and deliberate. It was clear he had done this many times before, yet there was still a gentleness in the way he cared for the horse. "You're good with them," she said, almost in awe. He shrugged, a modest gesture. "It's just part of the job. You learn to respect the animals or they'll teach you the hard way." There was a hint of something in his voice, a story, an experience, maybe even pain, that made her want to ask more, but she held back. It wasn't her place, yet. For a few moments they stood in silence, watching the horse finally settle. The sun dipped lower, turning the sky a brilliant orange and painting the fields with golden light. There was a stillness between them, a quiet tension that neither could ignore. Finally she broke the silence. "I'm sorry again for intruding, I didn't mean to cause trouble." He shook his head, giving her a small, understanding smile. "No harm done, just be careful. The land may look empty, but it's full of surprises, not all of them friendly." Her lips curved into a small smile. "I'll remember that." There was a moment when neither spoke, and she felt the strange pull of curiosity, interest, and something deeper she couldn't quite name. He seemed to notice her hesitation, his gaze steady, almost as if he were trying to read her thoughts. "You knew people are different," he said finally, with a hint of amusement. "Most folks in town are polite but cautious. You're brave enough to wander where you shouldn't." "That counts for something," she laughed softly, feeling a blush rise on her cheeks. "Brave, I'd call it reckless." "Call it what you want," he said with a shrug, "but I'll call it honest." There was a weight to his words, a sincerity that made her pause. She hadn't expected anyone to see her like that, not really. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of hay and dust, and for a moment they both just stood there, taking in the quiet beauty of the fields. She realized she didn't want to leave just yet. Something about this place, about him, made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. Finally, he nodded toward the path she had come from. "You should head back before it gets too late. Nights out here aren't as peaceful as they seem." She nodded, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and anticipation. "I will, thank you for everything." He tipped his hat slightly, a silent acknowledgement. "See you around then, don't get lost." As she walked back toward the town, she couldn't help but glance back at him one last time. He was still standing by the fence, the sun casting a golden glow around him, a figure of strength and quiet mystery. She felt a flutter in her chest, a feeling she hadn't expected on her very first week in town. Little did she know, this chance encounter on the edge of his ranch would mark the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. A story of trust, understanding, and the slow unfolding of something real and lasting. The cowboy, with his quiet strength, and the woman with her curiosity and courage, had crossed paths by accident, but their lives were about to become intertwined in ways neither of them could yet imagine. And as the sun disappeared completely behind the hills, the first stars began to appear, small points of light in the vast sky, much like the tiny spark of connection that had just been ignited between two very different people. The days after their first encounter passed quickly, each one marked by small, fleeting thoughts of the cowboy she had met on the edge of his ranch. She couldn't help but think about him, the quiet strength in his gaze, the gentleness with which he handled the horse, and the warmth behind his seemingly reserved manner. For someone new to the town, his presence stood out like a calm in the middle of a storm, a steady, unshakable force that she couldn't ignore. She went about her days exploring the town, settling into her work and slowly learning the rhythms of small-town life. The streets were lined with familiar faces, people who nodded politely but held their personal boundaries. Unlike the city, where strangers seemed invisible in the crowd, here every new face was noticed. And though she was careful, she knew her curiosity often drew attention. It wasn't long before she saw him again. This time, it was at the local general store. She had gone in for supplies, hoping to stock her small kitchen and maybe get a sense of what daily life was like here. She was examining the neatly stacked bags of feed when she heard the low murmur of voices behind her. Turning slightly, she caught sight of him talking to the store owner, his posture relaxed but alert. He glanced up, and their eyes met across the aisle. There was a brief pause, a moment of recognition, and then he offered a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of their prior meeting. Her heart skipped, and she felt a faint warmth spread across her chest. She nodded back shyly and focused on her shopping, though her mind kept drifting back to him. Over the next few days, they began to see each other more often. He would ride past on his horse while she was walking along the dirt roads, sometimes tipping his hat or exchanging a brief greeting. She started noticing the small things, how he greeted the neighbors, how the children waved at him, how he helped the older folks with their chores. There was a depth to his character, a sense of responsibility and care that went beyond appearances. But along with the intrigue came frustration. She found herself questioning his intentions. Was he genuinely kind, or was it a performance? The idea crossed her mind more than once that perhaps he was the type who charmed women for fleeting moments, a savage in her own words, someone who thrived on attention and passion without commitment. She hated the thought, but she couldn't ignore the feeling of unease that occasionally bubbled up. Her doubts came to a head one evening at the local barn dance, an event held every month to bring the community together. The barn was alive with music, laughter, and the sound of boots on wooden floors. Lanterns hung from the beams, casting a warm, golden glow over the room. She arrived alone, hoping to enjoy the event and observe the town's traditions without drawing attention to herself. She spotted him almost immediately. He was leaning casually against the railing, chatting with some of the other men, his hat tipped low but his eyes scanning the room. He caught her gaze, and for a moment she thought he might wave or approach. Instead, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod before returning to his conversation. It was then that she felt a surge of frustration. She had hoped for more, an acknowledgement, a gesture, something to indicate he remembered her beyond that first encounter. Her emotions spiraled, attraction mixed with irritation, curiosity mixed with doubt. She finally approached him, determined to speak her mind. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice firm but slightly trembling. Are you just looking for a fling? Something short-term, because if that's all this is, I want to know." The music seemed to fade around them, and he looked at her with calm, steady eyes. There was no embarrassment, no defensiveness, just honesty. "Why would you think that?" he asked, his voice soft but serious. "Because," she said, her frustration spilling out, "most men like you in this town, they want the thrill, the excitement, not a woman for her life. I don't want to be just another moment for someone like you." Her words were sharp, but beneath them was vulnerability. She was afraid of being hurt, afraid of being just another story he could forget by tomorrow. He took a step closer, not threatening but intentional. "I'm not most men," he said quietly. "I don't want a moment. I don't want a fling. I want a woman for my life. Not just tonight, not just for fun. You." The honesty in his words made her pause. She searched his face, looking for any sign of deception, and found none. There was a depth, a sincerity that caught her off guard. She had expected teasing, charm, or maybe a polite brush-off, but instead she received a truth that felt both unexpected and grounding. I don't know if I can trust that," she whispered, her voice almost lost under the music. "I've been hurt before. People like you, they don't stay." He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. "I get it," he said, "and I don't expect you to trust me immediately, but I'll show you, every day if I have to. I don't rush things and I don't play games. I work with my hands, I care for my land, my family, and my people. I don't have time for dishonesty, and I don't have the heart for it either." Her chest tightened as she listened. She could feel the authenticity in his words, the honesty that was so rare in her past experiences. Yet there was still caution. "Actions speak louder than words," she said softly, a small challenge in her tone. He smiled faintly, a knowing look in his eyes. "Then watch me. You'll see the difference." From that night onward, things began to change. They started spending small moments together. She would help at community events, and he would occasionally seek her out, asking for her opinion on tasks or inviting her to help with the horses. Each interaction was simple, yet layered with growing trust and subtle attraction. She began to see the man behind the rugged exterior, the one who worked tirelessly, cared deeply for the people and animals around him, and held a quiet strength that was impossible to ignore. But she also noticed the small vulnerabilities he didn't show to everyone. There were fleeting moments when his gaze softened, when a smile lingered longer than necessary, when he seemed almost lost in thought. Those moments told her more than words ever could. They revealed a man who had lived, who had faced challenges, who had loved and lost, and who now carried a careful hope for something real. One afternoon, while helping him with the horses, a situation arose that tested her perception of him. A young colt had gotten loose, bolting across the field and heading toward the road. Without hesitation, he ran after it, moving with precision and calm determination. She followed as best as she could, but it was clear he had the skills and experience that far surpassed her own. He caught the horse, calming it with gentle words and steady hands. Watching him, she felt admiration mingled with awe. He wasn't just brave or skilled. He was patient, understanding, and deeply connected to the animals and land he cared for. It was more than physical strength. It was a strength of character, a quiet command that demanded respect without needing to shout or dominate. After the incident, as they walked back toward the barn, she spoke, her voice quieter than usual. I didn't think you cared so much. About the horse, about everything." He glanced at her, a small, thoughtful smile on his lips. "Caring is part of who I am. You don't notice it because it's not always loud or flashy, but it's real. Everything I do, it comes from a place of respect, not show." Her heart softened at his words. She realized that her assumptions had been just that, assumptions, shaped by past experiences and fears. He was different. He wasn't looking for a moment of passion or excitement. He was looking for something lasting, something genuine. That night, she lay awake in her small cabin, thinking about the day, about him, and about the moments that had made her heart beat faster. There was excitement, yes, but also a strange comfort. For the first time in a long while, she felt that maybe, just maybe, trust could be rebuilt. Not with grand gestures or flashy words, but with simple actions, sincerity, and patience. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she was ready to open her heart completely. But for the first time, she felt a spark of hope that maybe someone could be both strong and kind, rugged yet gentle, a man who wanted more than a fleeting moment. And that spark was enough to keep her coming back, to keep her curious, to keep her willing to see how their story might unfold. The days following the barn dance passed in a blur of small but meaningful encounters. She found herself thinking about him often, how his eyes held a quiet strength, how his calm presence seemed to fill every space he entered, and how, despite his rugged exterior, there was a gentleness that she could sense even from a distance. She tried to focus on her work and her new life in the town, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. There was something magnetic about the way he carried himself, the way he treated people and animals alike, that made it impossible to ignore him. It was a warm afternoon when they found themselves alone again. He had invited her to help him at the ranch, claiming he needed an extra hand for some routine chores. She accepted, curious and a little nervous, not knowing what to expect. The ranch sprawled across acres of land, with fields dotted with grazing cattle and horses. The smell of hay and earth was stronger here than near the town, filling her senses with a sense of life and labor she had never known in her city apartment. As they worked, she noticed how he moved with ease and precision, his hands strong yet gentle, his eyes alert to every sound and movement around him. He explained what needed to be done, giving instructions calmly but never in a condescending way. She followed along, doing her best to keep up, and soon realized that working beside him required focus, patience, and care. "You're faster than I thought," he said at one point, watching her wrangle a young horse with surprising skill. His voice held admiration, but it was quiet, understated, like he wasn't one to hand out compliments easily. "I've had some experience with horses," she admitted, trying to hide the small pride in her voice. "Not as much as you, of course, but I'm learning." He nodded, eyes softening. "You learn quickly, that's good. You don't shy away from the hard work, and that counts for more than you realize." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the sounds of hooves, rustling hay, and the wind in the grass forming a rhythm that seemed to connect them in a way words could not. She began to notice the subtle details, how he would pause to check a horse's legs for cuts, how he adjusted the fence carefully to prevent any harm, and how, despite the physical demands of the work, he moved with a natural calm. There was a patience in him that contrasted sharply with the fast, impatient men she had known before. As the afternoon wore on, they sat together on a fallen log, wiping sweat from their brows. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting a golden glow over the fields and hills. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't known she was missing. "You really care about this place," she said quietly, almost to herself. He looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I do. It's not just about the work or the land. It's about the life that comes from it. The people, the animals, the community, it all matters. You can't rush it, you can't take shortcuts. You learn to respect it, or it teaches you lessons the hard way." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words. There was a depth to him that went beyond the surface, a life shaped by responsibility, experience, and perhaps past heartbreaks. She wanted to know more, but she also sensed he wasn't ready to share everything yet. Later, as they walked along the fence line, he paused and looked out over the fields. "You know," he began slowly, "I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I thought life would be easy, when I thought people could be trusted without question. I've learned the hard way that things aren't always simple. You have to work for trust, for respect, for love." She turned to him, sensing the vulnerability in his tone. "I know what you mean," she said softly. "I've been hurt too. It's hard to let someone in when you've been burned before. You don't want to make the same mistake twice." He nodded, meeting her gaze. "Exactly. That's why I'm careful. That's why I don't rush into things. But when I know someone is worth it, I give them my all. I don't do half measures." Her chest tightened at his words. She could see the truth in his eyes, a sincerity that was rare and compelling. For the first time, she felt a sense of connection that went beyond attraction. It was respect, understanding, and the possibility of something lasting. Over the next few weeks, they began to share more of themselves, slowly peeling back the layers they had carefully built. He would talk about the challenges of running a ranch, the long days, the responsibility of caring for animals and people alike. She would share stories of her life before moving to the town, the struggles she had faced, and the small victories she had achieved. Each conversation brought them closer, creating a bond based on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, a sudden rainstorm rolled in. They ran to the barn, laughing as the rain soaked them through. Inside, the smell of wet hay and earth filled the air, and for a moment they simply stood together, catching their breath. "You know," he said, his voice low and steady, "I'm glad you came into my life. Even if you think I'm too rugged or too serious, I'm glad you're here." She looked at him, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I'm glad too," she admitted softly. "Even if I've been cautious, even if I've doubted you, I'm glad." He smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips that reached his eyes. "We all have our walls," he said. The trick is finding someone worth letting in, and I think you're worth it." Her heart skipped at his words, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there could be something real between them. Not a fleeting moment, not a temporary thrill, but something lasting and meaningful. It wasn't all easy, of course. There were still moments of tension, times when her fears surfaced and she questioned his intentions. She would catch herself overthinking, wondering if he truly felt the same way, if he could handle the complexities of her past, or if he would walk away when things got difficult. And yet, he never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel small for her doubts. He simply showed up day after day with patience, understanding, and quiet strength. One afternoon, she arrived at the ranch to find him fixing a fence near the pasture. He looked up, saw her approach, and smiled. "I was hoping you'd come," he said. "I could use an extra hand." They worked together, side by side, their conversation easy and natural. He shared memories of his childhood on the ranch, the lessons his father had taught him, the times he had stumbled and learned from his mistakes. She listened, fascinated, feeling the weight of his experiences and the resilience it had built in him. At one point she paused, brushing her hair from her face. "You've been through a lot," she said softly, "and yet you seem whole. Like you've learned from it all, not broken by it." He looked at her, his gaze steady. "I've had my share of pain," he admitted, "but I've also had my share of joy. Life isn't about avoiding pain, it's about learning, growing, and finding the people who make it worth living. That's why I want someone I can trust, someone who sees me for who I am and still chooses to stay." Her chest tightened again, and she felt a tear prick her eye, not from sadness, but from the depth of his honesty. She realized that trust wasn't something that could be demanded. It was earned, slowly and carefully, through actions, words, and consistency. And he had earned it in ways that words alone could never convey. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields, they stood together, watching the sky change colors. The air was cool now, carrying the scent of rain and earth, and for a moment the world felt suspended in time. She realized that her walls were slowly coming down, that her heart was opening, and that the connection between them was real and undeniable. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope. Hope that love could be patient, gentle, and strong all at once. Hope that a man could be rugged yet kind, serious yet playful, and fully capable of giving his heart without fear. And most importantly, hope that she could trust again, not blindly but with careful, growing confidence. The cowboy turned to her, his expression softening. "You don't have to rush anything," he said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out together." She smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle into her heart. "I think I'd like that," she admitted. "I think I'd like that very much." And as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the hills, leaving the sky painted with stars, they stood together in quiet companionship, two people slowly letting each other in, learning that trust, patience, and honesty could build something stronger than any fleeting moment of passion ever could. The days grew warmer, and the ranch seemed to hum with life. The cowboy and the woman had spent countless hours together now, working the land, tending to the horses, and sharing quiet moments that felt more meaningful than any grand gesture could. Their relationship had grown steadily, built on trust, understanding, and small, consistent actions that revealed the depth of each other's character. Yet, despite their closeness, uncertainty still lingered beneath the surface. She loved the way he made her feel, safe, respected, and admired, but the fear that he might not truly want her for the long term tugged at her heart every now and then. It was a Saturday morning when she arrived at the ranch, carrying a basket of fresh bread she had baked the night before. The sun shone brightly over the fields, and the soft breeze carried the scent of hay and wildflowers. She spotted him in the distance, repairing a section of the fence near the horses. He looked up, saw her approaching, and gave her a small, warm smile that made her stomach flutter. "You're early," he said, brushing his hands on his jeans as he walked toward her. "I wanted to bring breakfast," she replied, setting the basket down on a nearby barrel. "Thought you could use some fuel for all that hard work." He chuckled, picking up a loaf of bread and breaking off a piece. "You're full of surprises," he said, taking a bite. "I like that." They ate in comfortable silence for a few moments, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the whinny of horses, and the distant hum of a tractor. It was peaceful, yet her thoughts wandered to the questions she had been holding back. She had seen his honesty and consistency, yet a part of her still wondered if he truly wanted a future together, or if she was simply a passing presence in his life. Finally, she decided to voice her fears. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly, her eyes on the bread in her hands. "Of course," he replied, his gaze gentle. "Do you really want this, me, or am I just someone to pass the time with?" Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the anxiety she felt. He paused, placing the bread back into the basket, and looked at her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "You've been watching closely, haven't you?" he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "I have," she admitted. "I've been trying to understand. I've been hurt before, and I can't just pretend I don't care or that I don't wonder if this is real." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me," he said softly but firmly. "I don't want a fling. I don't want a passing moment. I want you, I want us. I've wanted that from the very first time we met, even if I didn't say it out loud. I want a life with you, not just nights, not just excitement. You're the one I want by my side, through the hard work, the long days, the challenges, and the quiet moments like this." Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness but from relief and emotion. She had been afraid of being hurt, but here he was, standing in front of her, telling her the truth she had longed to hear. I want that too," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "I was just scared that I'd be hurt again." He pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her close as if the world outside the ranch didn't exist. "I'll never hurt you," he said. "I'll show you every day that I mean what I say. You can take all the time you need, but know this, I'm not going anywhere." The moment was interrupted by the neighing of a horse nearby. They pulled back slightly, smiling at each other, the tension replaced by a warm sense of understanding. It was a turning point, a moment when words had bridged the gap between doubt and trust, when their hearts had found reassurance in each other. Over the next few days, their bond continued to strengthen. They shared laughter, quiet conversations, and simple gestures of care. He would leave small notes for her to find, reminding her of her strength and bravery. She would bring fresh food or help him with chores without being asked. Each action, though small, carried weight, reinforcing the connection that was growing between them. But life, even in its simplest form, is rarely without challenges. Rumors began to circulate in the small town. Some people whispered that the cowboy's attention to her was fleeting, that she would soon be forgotten like others before her. Others questioned why a woman new to town could capture the heart of someone so grounded and respected. She heard snippets of conversation, half-truths that gnawed at her confidence. One afternoon, she confronted him, unable to hold her worry inside any longer. "People are talking," she said, frustration and fear mingling in her voice. They say you don't care for me like you say you do, that I'm just someone new to pass the time with." He looked at her, his eyes steady and calm, and shook his head. "Let them talk," he said firmly. "They don't know me, they don't know us. I've told you what I want, and I'll show it to you every day. The world can say what it wants, but it doesn't change what's real here between us." She took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. "I want to believe that," she said quietly. "I really do. I've been hurt so many times before, it's hard to trust again." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Trust isn't given all at once," he said. "It's earned slowly, carefully, and I'm willing to earn yours day by day, no matter what anyone says." The sincerity in his eyes was impossible to deny. She felt the weight of his words sink in, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of hope and security. The fear that had held her back began to fade, replaced by the possibility of a love that was patient, understanding, and strong. That evening, they went for a ride on horseback, the sky painted with the colors of sunset. The field stretched endlessly before them, golden and quiet, and the air carried the faint scent of wildflowers and earth. They rode side by side, neither speaking at first, simply enjoying the moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "I've lived a life where I had to be careful," he said. "I've been hurt, disappointed, and let down. But meeting you, it's different. You make me want to be better, to open up, to trust in something real again. That's why I want you, not just for a moment, not just for a day, but for my life." She turned to him, her heart full. "And I want you too," she said softly. "I've been scared, yes, but being with you, it feels right. It feels like home, even though I've only been here a short while." He smiled, a genuine warmth that made her chest ache with emotion. "Then let's take it one step at a time," he said. "No rush, no pressure, just us, learning, growing, and building something real together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they rode back toward the ranch in comfortable silence, the world around them quiet except for the rhythmic sound of hooves on the ground. She felt a peace she hadn't known in years, a feeling of belonging and trust that was slowly cementing itself in her heart. That night, as they sat by the fire in the barn, the smell of burning wood mixing with the faint scent of hay and leather, she realized how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. She had arrived in this town seeking peace, curiosity, and a fresh start, but what she found was far more profound. A connection with someone who saw her for who she was, who respected her, and who wanted her not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. She looked at him across the firelight, noticing the small lines of concentration on his face, the warmth in his eyes, and the gentle way he moved even in such a rugged environment. Her heart swelled with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being patient, for showing me what it means to trust again." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "And thank you," he said softly, "for trusting me, for letting me in. I promise I'll never take that for granted." It was in that quiet, intimate moment that she finally felt the weight of her past fears lift. The walls she had built around her heart, brick by brick, were slowly coming down, replaced by hope, trust, and a deep, abiding connection. She realized that love wasn't about rushing, grand gestures, or fleeting passion. It was about consistency, honesty, patience, and understanding. And as the night settled over the ranch, with stars twinkling in the clear sky above and the soft sounds of the countryside surrounding them, she knew that their journey together had only just begun. There would be challenges, yes, and moments of doubt, but they would face them together, building a love that was strong, real, and lasting. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where they were side by side, working, laughing, and growing together. And in that vision, she saw not just a cowboy, not just a man she admired, but a partner, a companion, and someone who truly wanted a life with her. The weeks turned into months, and the rhythm of life on the ranch became their own. She had grown accustomed to the early mornings, the long hours in the fields, and the gentle routine that accompanied a life of hard work and simple pleasures. Yet, it was no longer just about work. It was about them, and the life they were building together, step by step. Every morning, she woke to the sound of his boots on the wooden floorboards, the low call of the horses in the distance, and the soft creak of the cabin door. He would greet her with a smile, sometimes bringing her a cup of coffee or a small piece of bread from the kitchen. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes about his thoughtfulness and his desire to care for her in ways both big and small. Their days were filled with the chores of ranch life. She learned to saddle horses with skill, mend fences, and manage the feeding schedule for the animals. He guided her patiently, never condescending, always encouraging and celebrating even the smallest victories. In return, she offered her own insights and energy, helping to organize the fields, sort the cattle, and manage the little tasks that kept the ranch running smoothly. There were evenings when they would sit together by the fire, talking about their dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. He told her stories of his childhood on the ranch, the lessons his parents had taught him, and the hard truths he had learned along the way. She shared her own experiences, the challenges she had faced before moving to the town, and the lessons life had forced her to learn. Each conversation deepened their understanding of one another, creating a bond built not only on attraction but on trust, respect, and shared experience. Despite the steady routine, life was not without its challenges. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in while they were out checking the fences. The wind whipped through the fields, rain poured down in sheets, and the horses became restless. She panicked at first, unsure of what to do, but he remained calm, taking her hand and leading her to the safety of the barn. Together, they calmed the animals, secured the loose equipment, and waited for the storm to pass. "It's okay," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "We've handled worse. The important thing is that we're together, and we take it one step at a time." She looked at him, drenched and exhausted, and felt her heart swell with love and admiration. He was not just strong, but dependable, patient, and steady in the face of difficulties. She realized that these small moments, these challenges and triumphs, were the building blocks of a life together, proving his words true every day. As the months went by, they continued to grow closer. The town began to recognize their bond, noticing the genuine affection, respect, and partnership between them. Friends and neighbors would comment on how natural they looked together, how they seemed to complement one another perfectly, and how their laughter and support of one another brought life to the community. One evening, after a long day in the fields, they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and gold, and the air was filled with the soft hum of insects and the distant call of animals settling in for the night. He reached over and took her hand, his thumb brushing gently against her skin. "You know," he began softly, "I've never felt this way about anyone before, not like this. You make life better, you make it feel worth it." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "I feel the same. I've been cautious, I've been scared, but with you I feel safe. I feel like I can finally trust again, and that's not something I've felt in a long time." They sat in silence for a while, letting the quiet of the evening envelop them. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that spoke louder than words ever could. She felt a sense of peace, of belonging that she had never known before. This was home, not just a place, but a person, a partnership built on love, trust, and shared life. As time passed, they began planning for the future. They discussed improvements to the ranch, dreams of expanding the farm, and hopes for a home that could grow with them. Every plan was a shared effort, every decision a reflection of their partnership. They learned to communicate openly, to navigate disagreements with respect, and to celebrate victories together, big or small. One afternoon, while tending to the horses, they came across a newborn foal struggling to stand. She panicked, unsure of what to do, but he guided her patiently, showing her how to support the foal and calm the mother. Together, they helped the little horse take its first steps. It was a small but profound moment, a reminder that life was full of challenges that could be overcome with patience, cooperation, and care. "It's amazing," she whispered, watching the foal wobble unsteadily on its legs. "Just like us, huh?" He smiled, brushing rain-soaked hair from her face. "Exactly like us, careful, patient, learning together." The seasons changed, and their relationship grew stronger with each passing day. Winters brought long, cozy evenings by the fire, summers brought hard work in the sun, and spring brought renewal and growth in the fields and in their lives. Every moment, from the mundane to the extraordinary, reinforced the foundation they had built together. One evening, under a sky full of stars, he turned to her with a seriousness that made her heart race. "I want you to know something," he said. "All this time I've meant every word I said. You're not just someone I care about. You're my partner, my equal, the person I want by my side for everything life throws at us." Her chest tightened with emotion and tears filled her eyes. "And I want the same," she whispered. "I never thought I could feel this way again, but with you, I do. I trust you, and I want a life with you too." He pulled her into a hug, holding her close, and she felt the warmth of his strength and the sincerity of his love wrap around her like a shield. In that moment, all doubts and fears melted away, replaced by a profound sense of security, trust, and deep emotional connection. Life continued in its steady rhythm, full of work, laughter, challenges, and small victories. They celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and town events together. Friends and neighbors marveled at their partnership, seeing in them a rare balance of strength and kindness, passion and patience, independence and unity. One afternoon, as they worked side by side, she paused to look at him, her heart full. "You've changed my life," she said softly. "I came here looking for peace, but I found something far more than that. I found love, trust, and a life worth living." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you've changed mine. I knew I wanted a life with someone, but I never imagined it could feel this complete. You make every day better, brighter, and more meaningful." As the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, they stood together, hand in hand, knowing that they had built something rare and lasting. Not through grand gestures or fleeting passion, but through patience, honesty, and unwavering care for one another. The ranch was more than just land now. It was a symbol of their life together. Every fence they had repaired, every animal they had cared for, every challenge they had faced side by side had strengthened their bond. It was proof that love could be built, nurtured, and made to last through action, consistency, and shared effort. And as the stars began to appear in the clear night sky, she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, with trust, love, and the deep understanding that comes from truly knowing and supporting one another. It wasn't just about passion or fleeting romance. It was about a life shared, a partnership built on respect, care, and unwavering commitment. And in that life, they had found not only each other but a home, a future, and the certainty that love, when real and patient, could endure anything. The woman smiled, feeling a warmth she had never known, and whispered, "I'm glad I trusted you." He smiled back, his eyes full of sincerity and love. "And I'm glad you did. We're in this together for life." The ranch was quiet now, save for the soft sounds of animals settling in for the night. The wind carried the faint scent of earth and hay, wrapping around them like a gentle reminder that life, love, and trust were all built in small, steady steps. And together they would continue to build their life, their love, and their future, one day at a time.